Now, there are all sorts of reasons, Mr. Speaker, why the city in which we now sit is the most productive region in the whole of Europe. We have the time zone, the language, the agglomeration of talents, and above all, we have a mass transit system that every day conveys millions of people efficiently and affordably with tubes and trains and 8,600 buses into the central activities zone in the morning and out in the evening, like the respiration of some vast undersea salinterate. And as the public transport network has expanded in the last 150 years, it has brought hope and opportunity and job prospects to people growing up in every part of this city and beyond. And it is the ambition of this government to employ that same utensil, fantastic transport infrastructure, to unite and level up across the whole country. And of course, there is far more to do in London, and the present mayor, frankly, needs to be shaken out of his complacency. But there is even more to do across the nation as a whole. Whether you're stuck in a jam on the A303 or on the outskirts of Lincoln, whether you're trying to get from Warrington to Manchester or toiling across the Pennines by rail, you know that this country is being held back by our inadequate infrastructure. And so, in the next few weeks, this government will be setting out more details of the transport revolution, because we all know the potential of transport to change your life and the life of your town or your city. And we know that efficient transport can clean the air and cut pollution and get cars off the road, and we can simultaneously reach our ambition of net zero by 2050, and we can shorten your commute and give you more time with your family and increase productivity and bring business and investment to left-behind communities. And so that's why we're embarking now on a massive programme of investment in local transport, starting with a record-breaking £5 billion of new investment in buses and bicycles. An investment that will mean bus passengers across the country seeing a dramatic improvement in their daily journeys. More than 4,000 brand new buses on the roads. Zero carbon, British-built buses on the roads of places like Ashfield, Barnstaple, Southampton, Manchester, many more towns and cities besides. More services, including in the evenings and weekends. Simpler, cheaper, and more convenient ticketing. Properly designed priority schemes to speed passengers past the traffic jams. And it's an investment that will also mean cyclists enjoying hundreds of miles of brand new separated lanes with mini Hollands blooming like so many tulips in towns and cities right across the country. And that £5 billion, Mr. Speaker, is just the start. My very good friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, will be making a full announcement in this month's budget, and I have no desire to steal his thunder. But I can signal today that we are taking forward transformative investments, improvements from Cornwall to the A1 north of Newcastle, from South Salisbury to South Ribble, from Cheadle to Chiverton, dual carriageways, roundabouts, bypasses, underpasses, and those are just the roads. We have already set out plans to explore new investments in the rail network across the north, developing proposals to reopen the Fleetwood line in Lancashire and the Ashington-Blythe rail line in the north-east, improving track and platform capacity at Middlesbrough Station, installing new signalling at Harrogate, one of North Yorkshire's busiest stations. And further south, I can today announce that we will be upgrading the Bristol East Junction, a major pinch point in the rail network of the southwest that limits access to the Brunel-designed Victorian splendour of Bristol Temple Meads Station. Mr. Speaker, the transport revolution is local because it must be local. We can unite and level up across the country with fantastic local improvements. Better rail, less congested roads, beautiful British-built buses, cleaner, greener, quieter, safer, more frequent. And above all, we can improve the quality of life for people and improve their productivity. We make places more attractive to live in and to invest in. But we cannot make these improvements in isolation from one another, because we'll only be doing half the job. We will not fix the great musculoskeletal problem of UK transport. Yes, we must fix the joint between the knee bone and the thigh bone and the shin bone and the ankle bone. And yes, we must fix the arthritis in the fingers and the toes. But we also have to fix the spine, Mr. Speaker. And our generation faces a historic choice. We can try to get by. We can try to get by with the existing routes from north to south. We can consign the next generation to overcrowding, standing up in the carriageways, or we can have the guts to take a decision. No matter how difficult, unlike the party opposite, by the way, Mr. Speaker, no matter how difficult and how controversial, that will deliver prosperity to every part of the country. 50 minutes off the time to Glasgow. When it comes to advocating HS2, it must be said that the task is not made easier by HS2 Limited, the company concerned. Speaking as a Member of Parliament whose constituency is on the route, I cannot say that HS2 Limited has distinguished itself in the handling of local communities. As everybody knows, the costs forecasts have exploded. But poor management to date has not detracted, in my view, from the fundamental value of the project. The review recently conducted by Douglas Oakervie, copies of which will be placed in the Library of the House, leaves no doubt of the clinching case for high-speed rail. A vast increase in capacity with hundreds of thousands of extra seats, making it much easier for travellers to move up and down our long, narrow country. And that means faster journey times. Not just more capacity, it means faster journey times, extraordinarily fast journey times. Passengers arriving at Birmingham Airport will be able to get to central London by train in 38 minutes, which compares favourably, Mr. Speaker, you will note, with the time it takes to get from Heathrow by taxi, a point I just draw to the attention of the House. But this is not just about getting from London to Birmingham and back. This is about finally making, considerably faster than the Piccadilly line, this is about finally making a rapid connection from the West Midlands to the Northern Powerhouse, to Liverpool, to Manchester, to Leeds, and simultaneously permitting us to go forward with Northern Powerhouse Rail across the Pennines, finally giving the home of the railways the fast connections they need. And none of it makes any sense without HS2. The Infrastructure and Projects Authority considers that this first phase can be delivered for its current projected costs of 35 billion to 45 billion in today's prices. The designs have been improved immeasurably thanks to the tireless contributions of campaigners, including my right honourable friend, the member for Chesham and Amersham. I don't think she's in her place. And if we start now, services could be running by the end of the decade. So today, Mr. Speaker, the Cabinet has given high-speed rail the green signal. We are going to get this done. And to ensure that we do so without further blowouts on either cost or schedule, we are today taking decisive action to restore discipline to the programme. I will be appointing a minister whose full-time job will be to oversee the project. A new ministerial oversight group will be tasked with taking strategic decisions about it. There will be changes to the way HS2 is managed. We will, in line with Mr. Oakervie's recommendations, be interrogating the current costs to identify where savings can be made in phase one without the costs and delays that would be associated with a detailed redesign, and so that the company can focus solely on getting phases 1 and 2A built on something approaching time and budget. I will be creating new delivery arrangements for both the grossly behind schedule Euston terminus and phase 2B of the wider project. But before those designs are finalised and legislation introduced, we will also present an integrated plan for rail in the north. Informed by an assessment from the National Infrastructure Commission, it will, in line with the findings of the Oakervie review, look at how we can best design and integrate rail investments across the north, including Northern Powerhouse Rail between Leeds and Manchester. And I've just spoken to the Mayor of Greater Manchester, who has warmly welcomed this project, which I committed to supporting, by the way, I seem to remember, during my first days in office. I want the plan to identify the most effective design and sequencing of all relevant investments in the north. For example, with many in the north crying out for better east-west links instead of improved north-south ones, which you've heard many times in this House, some have suggested delaying or even cancelling HS2 in order to get Northern Powerhouse Rail done more quickly. But I want to say to you, Mr. Speaker, and to the House, this is not an either-or proposition. Yeah. Both are needed, and both will be built as quickly and as cost-effectively as possible. And to make sure that happens, we will, working closely with northern leaders, explore options for creating a new delivery vehicle for Northern Powerhouse Rail. And we will start treating HS2 north of Birmingham, Northern Powerhouse Rail and other local rail improvements as part of one integrated master plan, High Speed North. Because something has to change, Mr. Speaker. And those who deny this, those who say we should simply build 2B and Northern Powerhouse Rail, according to the plans currently on the table, are effectively condemning the North to get nothing for 20 years. And that would be intolerable, Mr. Speaker. So as we draw up this plan, we are not asking whether it's phase 2B or not 2B. That is not the question, Mr. Speaker. The question is how we can bring a transport revolution to the north sooner. And together this revolution in transport, in local and national transport, has the potential to be truly transformative for the entire country. And yes, it is ambitious, but ambition, frankly, is what we have lacked for far too long. 2 centuries ago, our ancestors would have been could have been content with breeding faster horses. Instead, they invented the railways. They created the transport network on which the United Kingdom rose to economic preeminence. They looked to the future of transport and they made it happen. And today, it is our duty to do the same. Let us bring about a future where high-speed trains glide between our great cities, where electric buses convey us cleanly around our towns, where self-driving cars roam along roads that are free of the congestion that causes so much pollution, and where a new generation of cyclists pedal safely and happily to school and work in tree-dappled sunlight on their own network of fully segregated cycle paths. This government, as we did in London, this government will deliver a new anatomy of British transport, a revolution in this nation's public transport provision, and a sign to the world that in the 21st century, this United Kingdom still has the vision to dream big dreams and the courage to bring those dreams about, and I commend this statement.
Jeremy Corbyn. Mr. Speaker, I thank the Prime Minister for an advance copy of his statement. Once again, we see the government taking ideas from the Labour Party adopting our language, but falling very long way short on the substance of it. This, Mr. Speaker, is a government that's unwilling to make the scale of investment needed to revive parts of this country that have been decimated by successive Conservative governments. It's a government that's proved itself unable to manage infrastructure projects properly and incapable of keeping a lid on the costs.
Absolutely.
Today's piecemeal announcements don't add up to a serious plan to rebalance the economy or to tackle the serious climate emergency that we all face. They don't even come close, Mr. Speaker, to repairing the damage done by a decade of Tory government. But it's true, you know it. The Prime Minister The Prime Minister laments our inadequate infrastructure, yet it's his party that's been starving the country of investment over the last 10 years, resulting in the worst regional inequality in Europe. Today, the Prime Minister is selling his announcement as a prize for parts of the Midlands and the North. I simply tell him this: people in those regions to whom he promised so much in the general election are going to be sorely disappointed when they see what actually happens. Take HS2, for example. The Labour Party supports HS2 as a means to boost regional economies and reducing climate emissions. It's essential for boosting rail capacity and freeing up other lines for increased freight use, etc. But we don't see why the government should get a slap on the back for announcing it's going ahead. After all, it's only because of the abject failure of successive Conservative governments to keep on top of the costs that the project's future was put in doubt in the first place. Today's proposed boardroom shake-up comes far too late to avoid the public having to fork out tens of billions more than was forecast in the first place. It's money that's already been wasted because of the incompetence of this Tory government and its predecessors. The leaked Oakervee review is going to come out later, apparently, was correct to say that HS2 must be fully integrated as part of the modern railway system. It must extend to the great northern cities, linking up with Northern Powerhouse Rail, and eventually to Scotland, to end the need for domestic flying in this country at the earliest possible opportunity. So, we are concerned that the links to Manchester and Leeds are now under review and could, reportedly, be even downgraded. HS2 must be developed with more sensitivity to local communities and much more sensitivity to the environmental impact, particularly on modern and ancient woodlands across this country. And if it's to have public support, the fares on HS2 must be affordable and comparable with the rest of the fare system on the railway network. Can the Prime Minister tell us where the trains will be built? Will those jobs and training be done in this country? But also, Mr. Speaker, what about other parts of the country, like, for example, the far southwest? When will the Prime Minister match the £2.5 billion commitment to upgrade the Great Western Main Line as our only train line into the southwest? We need to have better connectivity beyond Bristol to Devon and Cornwall. We believe that the case is now unanswerable that our railways, Mr. Speaker, should be publicly owned and publicly run to improve the service and cut fares by 33%. Does the Prime Minister recognise that too many people are simply priced off the railways? The average commuter is now paying £3,067 for their season ticket, £873 more than when the Conservatives came into office in 2010. Why won't the Prime Minister cut the cost of travelling? Why should people in Britain have to pay so much for expensive fares, more expensive than any other comparable country? Mr. Speaker, when I first raised the question of buses at Prime Minister's Question Time, I was ridiculed by many Tory MPs and many in our media. From the look of the front pages of our papers today, those same quarters now regard the focus on buses as a political masterstroke. Well, I take the credit for it, it's fine. But in reality, Mr. Speaker, what the government have said today about buses is frankly woeful. They've cherry-picked policies from the Labour manifesto, but underfunded them. It doesn't make up for the deep cuts since 2010. Funding for buses has fallen by £645 million a year in real terms since 2010. 3,300 routes have either been cut or withdrawn, and fares have soared at 2.5 times that of average wages. It's councils that keep bus routes open. We need long-term funding for our local authorities that have suffered such severe cuts and now face a further £8 billion black hole over this Parliament because of underfunding. And the government is still refusing to give all councils the powers to improve local bus services and the option of public ownership of their services. On cycling, all he's offering actually is 250 miles of cycle routes. Our manifesto promised 3,300 miles of cycle routes all across the country. Again, it's just plain inadequate by this government. Underinvestment by the Conservatives has created problems that they are forced to acknowledge, but they simply aren't serious about fixing them. Regional inequality is going to be solved by... Is regional equality going to be solved by 10 free ports? Isn't this just a gimmick, really creating storage spaces for the super rich to dodge taxes and launder money? Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is clearly fond of announcing big shiny projects, like the scheme to build a bridge over the Irish Sea. Why not go the whole hog and make it a garden bridge, connected to an airport in the sea? It stands as much chance of actually being built as any of those failed projects by the former Mayor of London put forward. Or, Mr. Speaker, why not a cable car between Scotland and Northern Ireland? Or better still, a giant zip wire. The Prime Minister could be the first to try it out. The saddest thing, Mr. Speaker, about today's announcement is the high likelihood that so much of it won't be delivered. With the Prime Minister demanding 5% cuts in the very departments that are supposed to carry these policies out, I fear that those communities that desperately need investment and new infrastructure are going to be let down when today's headlines become yesterday's news and they find that nothing has changed.
Sorry. Just help the House. I'm expecting to run this to around 1:40. So some members may not get in, but if we all help each other, it will be much nearer to getting everyone in. Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thought the right honourable gentleman did a manful attempt there to conceal his fundamental agreement with what we're doing, and you know he raised some interesting points. Actually, we're doing a transport revolution across the whole of the southwest, not only investing in the seawall at Dawlish on the railways, but we'll of course be upgrading the roads, the A303 through the southwest. We'll be doing improvements in Wales, and I think it's high time, by the way, that the Bryn Glas tunnels were unblocked. We encouraged the Labour government in Wales to do that. HS2, of course, don't forget, brings 50 minutes off the journey time to Glasgow. Every part of this country benefits. As for fares, I would just remind him that fares rose twice as fast under the Labour government. And the whole point of the honourable gentleman is trying to interrupt me from a sedentary position. I would remind him the whole point of putting in another 200,000 seats in capacity is that you thereby drive down prices for the consumer. It's about competition. Mr. Speaker, he made a heroic attempt to cavil and disagree with what is fundamentally a wonderful project for this country. He even tried to dislike our bus plans. I don't know quite. No, he claimed them for himself. Mr. Speaker, I'll take that. The leader of the opposition, as far as I understand the position, actively supports the announcement of the government today, and I congratulate him on that.
You, Merriman.
The additional £5 billion for buses and cycle links is greatly welcomed. Last year, the Transport Select Committee called for additional funding in buses and a buses strategy, both of which are coming to fruition. How will the Prime Minister ensure that the money allocated to local authorities for these projects is spent by local authorities for these projects? Will it be ring-fenced? And if not, how will we really ensure that we are levelling up for our public transport system?
Well, I congratulate my honourable friend for the work he does for his community, and I can assure him we will ensure that when money is allocated for buses or for cycling projects, it is spent on buses and cycling projects.
Stand it. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and let me thank the Prime Minister for an advance copy of the statement. Let me be mindful of one reality. No number of prime ministerial vanity projects will ever heal the economic damage and the damage to connectivity which this Tory Brexit will inflict. In terms of the HS2 announcement, enhanced rail infrastructure is obviously welcome, despite the indecision and the waste that has been synonymous with this project. We will wait and see if the Prime Minister is capable of getting this decision through his own party and past his own chief advisor. However, if the Prime Minister is truly committed to rail connectivity across these islands, will he engage with the Scottish Government to improve rail links from Scotland to the major cities of the north of England, such as Manchester, Newcastle and beyond? Will he also explore collaboration on the extension of the Borders rail line and what resources will be provided? The Prime Minister may talk about his priorities of one nation. We know what nation he's talking about. And, Mr. Speaker, it certainly doesn't include the Scottish nation. Can I further ask, given his previous opposition to the Barnett formula and his party's repeated failure to fully implement it, can the Prime Minister confirm if all of the spending that he is determined to engage in will be subject to Barnett consequentials? Yes or no? I welcome the fact that the UK Government is following the lead of the Scottish Government, who announced a £500 million bus infrastructure programme last September. Mr. Speaker, given the Prime Minister's previous association with buses, can the Prime Minister reassure the House that false advertisements will be banned from the new bus fleet? And finally, on the bridge, this is a Prime Minister that couldn't even build a bridge across the Thames. He'll therefore have to forgive those of us that are sceptical that he can build one over the 20-mile expanse of the North Sea. Will the Prime Minister therefore provide the estimated £20 billion for his project to the Scottish Government and the Northern Ireland Executive so they can spend those money on our own priorities?
Prime Minister!
Mr. Speaker, I can assure the right honourable gentleman that we will, of course, collaborate with the Scottish Government on projects that I think will be of massive benefit for the whole of our United Kingdom. And on his substantive question about Barnett consequentials, there of course will be Barnett consequentials as far as the buses are concerned. I'm afraid I'm not following him in building on all the. As far as his plan to build a bridge across the North Sea, Mr. Speaker, I think he needs to look at the geography of the United Kingdom again. Indeed, the only obstacle standing in the way of HS2 is the crackpot SNP plans to put an economic border between England and Scotland, break up the United Kingdom and have a border at Berwick.
Andrew Mitchell.
My right honourable friends, a comprehensive announcement today will be very widely welcomed across the West Midlands and in Birmingham, and nowhere more so than in the royal town of Sutton Coldfield. Will he today pay tribute to the superb leadership marshalling the arguments of our West Midlands Mayor Andy Street and the case that he has put which will underwrite our economic prosperity for the future?
Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend is absolutely right. I salute the work of Andy Street, his vision for transport in the West Midlands, and that will be supported and encouraged and fomented by HS2.
Red Stringer.
Mr. Speaker, I very much welcome the announcements as far as HS2 and the integration into HS3 is concerned. Yep. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that his statement could also be improved and bring more immediate jobs to the north of England if, as well as building HS2 from London to the north, we also started building HS2 from the north to the south? And finally, for real ambition, would he not agree that HS2 should go to Scotland, which would help to unite the two countries?
Mr. Speaker, we'll certainly get on with building Phase 2A immediately, but I can tell him that HS2 already does go to Scotland. That's one of the great advantages of this project.
Michael Fabricant.
The Prime Minister will understand that Andy Street and I tend to talk about soft furnishings as it tends to avoid argument, because I'm less than enthusiastic about the route of HS2, which neither connects with Eurostar nor with Birmingham New Street or indeed with St Pancras. But I'm delighted to hear that the Prime Minister has said that the organisation of HS1 Limited will be revised. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that it's very, very important that as HS2 now is going ahead, that we also compensate well those people in my constituency and his who will be affected by HS2?
Mr. Speaker, the short answer to that is of course.
Lillian Greenwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The confirmation that the full HS2 route has been given the go-ahead is welcome news, and there's a strong case for building the Birmingham to East Midlands part early. But if this project is to deliver on its potential for our region, we need assurances that the Phase 2B bill will receive royal assent in this Parliament, that it won't be delayed further or downgraded to cut costs. Will he give those assurances today?
Yeah, of course, Mr. Speaker, we are committed to Phase 2B, but I think she would appreciate that now, given what's happened in the past 10 years with Phase 1, it is vital that we use this inflection point to make sure that the taxpayer gets maximum value as we proceed.
Victoria Prentice.
Speaker. The Right Honourable Lady for Cheshireman Amersham, who is recovering from a major operation, has asked me to thank the volunteers and donors from all over the nation who have fought against HS2 over the past 11 years. The last 3 years have given us a few lessons in what gracious defeat looks like. And while I remain worried by the environmental, financial and governance issues of this project, I really do wish it all the best. I was particularly pleased to hear what the Prime Minister said about the northern section and the speed by which he needs to deliver that, and about buses and bikes. Can I ask the Prime Minister one ask, Mr. Speaker? Holistic approach to blight. If it's impossible to regrow ancient trees or to get rid of congestion where there is congestion, can we please compensate communities by, for example, building their local hospital?
Mr. Speaker, what we can certainly do is ensure that where there is environmental damage, and we must say, of course, that there will be effects on woodlands. There we must restore them. We're planting 7 million trees, which is many more than will be destroyed.
Charlotte Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While on balance, I welcome the news that HS2 has been given the go-ahead for the capacity gains which will benefit the North West region and for the construction and rail supply firms in my constituency, who I hope will receive a fair shot at winning contracts associated with the project. My constituents in Culture, Croft, Risley and Hollins Green in particular will be looking for assurances that the unnecessary Goulburn spur will be removed from the proposed route. This is an issue that transcending party affiliations, local MPs are in agreement on. Will the Prime Minister give those assurances?
Mr. Speaker, I've had representations on the Goulburn spur from many sides of the House, many people in this House, and we will certainly be looking at that.
Sir Graham Brady.
Can I welcome the increased priority for Northern Powerhouse Rail and the link from Manchester to Leeds in particular? But can I also ask my right honourable friend to ensure an urgent review of parts of the route for 2B, including the Goulburn spur, entirely unnecessary and likely to cost over £1 billion, completely wasted money, but also to look at the fact that the station for Manchester Airport, absurdly, isn't at Manchester Airport. It will be built on ancient woodland in my constituency at Davenport Green instead.
My right honourable friend makes an excellent point, both about the Goulburn spur and Manchester Airport, and we will certainly be looking at both those.
Munira Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Key to cutting carbon emissions and tackling climate change is cutting domestic flights and moving people onto our railways. That's why the HS2 announcement is to be welcomed, and building a third runway at Heathrow is an act of environmental vandalism. Will the Prime Minister now prove his credentials on climate change, make good his promise of lying down in front of the bulldozers, or far more simply, just cancel the third runway?
Mr. Speaker, I see no bulldozers at present, nor no immediate prospect of them arriving.
Polly Latham.
Local authorities have limited resources to deliver their new local cycling walking infrastructure plan. Would my right honourable friend the Prime Minister support the delivery of parts of those plans through appropriate local charities such as the Derwent Valley Trust in Derbyshire that are capable of implementing key sections of the network?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I think it would be very important that we collaborate with appropriate delivery vehicles such as the charity that she mentions.
Meg Hillier.
Speaker, it's good to have certainty over HS2, but the Prime Minister has unveiled a raft of big spending projects. Where's the money going to come from?
Mr. Speaker, the money is coming through the hard work and effort of the British people, and this government will manage our finances prudently and ensure that the economy is not wrecked as the last Labour government succeeded in doing.
HS2 will connect with the Elizabeth Line and Heathrow Airport at Old Oak Common Station, a station that will become every bit as famous as Victoria or Waterloo. But Old Oak Common will neither be old nor common. So does the Prime Minister agree with me that we should have a name in keeping with its importance and iconic, maybe after the first woman Prime Minister of our country?
Well, Mr. Speaker, that is a brilliant idea. Let's try that one out on the Mayor of London.
I asked the Prime Minister about the prospects for change in relation to the eastern leg of 2B. The original HS2 vision was to serve and regenerate our towns. But in South Yorkshire, our towns are facing all of the pain and none or very little of the gain. And can I commend to him the HS North concept come up with by local campaigners, they got there first, which actually has a plan, an integrated plan to help towns like Doncaster and Mexborough.
Mr. Speaker, he makes a very good point on behalf of Doncaster, and we are certainly looking at the HS plan that he mentions.
Sir William Cash.
The Prime Minister knows how bitterly disappointed my constituents in Staffordshire will be about the decision. Could I simply ask him, when he's considering the question of review, to include Phase 2A from Birmingham to Crewe and the rest of that part of the constituency which is going to be so badly affected, because we need to have a proper link with Handsacre to make sure that Stoke and Stafford are properly serviced. Does he understand that, and will he do everything to make sure that we're kept in the review?
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker. On Handsacre, he has my full support.
Hilary Bann.
Indeed, Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Prime Minister's announcement, but given what he has said about reviewing Phase 2B, could he tell the people of Leeds when he now expects the new HS2 station to open?
Mr. Speaker, we'll get it going as soon as possible.
Jones.
Can I congratulate the Prime Minister on that statement? He's so right when he says the economy of the North needs both east-west and north-south connectivity. Does he agree with me that the challenge we face in transport is not, as sometimes articulated, between local or national investment? What we need is both.
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker, and you can't have the gains of one without the other. Local productivity won't be boosted unless we improve national connectivity up the spine of this country. That's what HS2 is all about.
Lucy Powell.
Mr. Speaker, I strongly welcome the announcement today on HS2, but let's be clear, the question mark was written by the Prime Minister and his government, and it shouldn't have been written at all. But under the terms of the review we're now seeing, can he ensure that the full benefits of NPR and HS2 are fully integrated at Manchester Piccadilly Station and that no stone is left unturned in making sure that that can happen?
Yes, I certainly can, Mr. Speaker.
Eddie Hughes.
Mr. Speaker, infrastructure costs are frequently driven up by unforeseen ground conditions. Can the Prime Minister remind the House of the commitment by this government to increase spending on research and development, such as Birmingham University, who are working on quantum technology to map those ground conditions?
I thank my honourable friend. He's entirely right. And HS2's investment will not just drive the construction sector, it will drive the economy across this country, including higher education.
Jonathan Edwards.
The last time I looked on a map, London, Birmingham, Manchester and Leeds were all in England. So can the Prime Minister explain why does Scotland and Northern Ireland get 100% Barnett rating from HS2 whilst Wales gets 0%?
Well, of course, as he knows very well, if he looks at the map, that North Wales will indeed benefit from the crew link. But I might say to the representative from Wales that actually it's high time that the Welsh Labour government got on and delivered the M4 bypass at the Bringlass tunnels, and we in this government will get on. If they won't do it, we will.
Andrew Bridgen.
HS2 is unloved, unwanted and has been grossly mismanaged. It very adversely affects my constituents. Does the Prime Minister appreciate my and my constituents' concerns that this could well be an albatross around this government and the country's neck moving forward? And doesn't it set the bar very low for the future delivery of infrastructure projects on time and on budget by all future governments?
Mr. Speaker, every great infrastructure project is opposed by the people at this stage. The M25 had 39 separate planning. The Treasury was against the M25. I seem to remember delivering the Olympics, not to speak of Crossrail, with the Treasury trying to get rid of Crossrail. Every single infrastructure project is opposed at this critical moment. We've got to have the guts, the foresight to drive it through.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. In London, and thanks to the Hopper fare of Sadiq Khan, I can travel across the entire Greater London area on 2 buses up to 30 miles for £1.50. In Newcastle, £1.50 will barely get me 4 stops up the West Road. Yeah. Will this funding bring north-eastern bus fares into line with those in London, or is this all bluff and bluster signifying nothing?
I'd remind the Honourable Lady that bus ridership has fallen catastrophically under the current Labour Mayor because of his mismanagement of the system. Crime has risen precipitately, and we will ensure not only that we drive down crime in spite of what the current Labour Mayor is doing, but we have fantastic, cheaper, greener, cleaner buses across the country.
Mary Robinson.
Speaker, I welcome this statement and particularly the decision to start treating HS2 Northern Powerhouse Rail under the local rail improvements as one integrated master plan, High Speed North. As this is brought forward and the design stage is brought towards, how are we going to ensure that local business leaders and communities are included in what's best for their area locally and in terms of this high speed rail project?
Mr. Speaker, we'll make sure that businesses and communities are fully involved in the preparations for High Speed North.
So George Hubbard.
The devil, Mr. Speaker, as the Prime Minister well knows, is in the detail. Could I cautiously, though, welcome the announcement on HS2 and the announcement about linking up the northern powerhouse great cities, during the course of which the Prime Minister referred to and Liverpool. Could he give us some indication as to what he meant by that?
Mr. Speaker, that's at the next stage of the consultation.
Neil Clark.
The government has ended uncertainty for those who want HS2, but will my right honourable friend the Prime Minister also end uncertainty for my constituents in Stafford who have waited years for their houses to be bought and for compensation to be paid?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we'll do just that. And I apologise to everybody for the uncertainty that's been involved.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the commitment both to HS2 and Northern Powerhouse Rail, but in neither case did the Prime Minister mention Sheffield. Would he therefore confirm that the Sheffield Loop will go ahead as planned on HS2 and that the Northern Powerhouse Rail improvements are not just about Manchester to Leeds, but Manchester to Sheffield as well?
Mr. Speaker, we're proceeding with the whole of the HS2 plan, but as the House will appreciate, given what has gone before, it is right that we interrogate the methods and the costs as we go forward with phase 2B.
Jeremy Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend knows I don't agree with the decision he's reached on HS2, but I respect the fact it was a difficult decision, and I'm grateful to him for listening to both sides of the argument before he made it. Now that it is made, Isn't it right that HS2 Limited need to not just compensate more swiftly and more fairly than they have, but also communicate better than they have with those affected by the line? And will he make that specifically part of the remit of the new HS2 Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I think my right honourable friend is absolutely right. I think the record of HS2 in engaging and in communicating with local people has been woeful, and we will ensure that changes from now.
Gavin Newlands. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister said it was the SNP that were standing in the way of high-speed rail to Scotland. In fact, it's his government that are doing that. So can you tell us precisely what year will the line be extended to Scotland?
Well, I'm delighted in the first place that he supports high-speed rail, that he supports HS2, and as I say, the only obstacle to that great project is the deranged SNP plan to install an economic barrier between the UK, including an immigration barrier, for all we know, between the UK and between England and Scotland.
Amanda Soloway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am delighted by the statement today. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that not only does it support the growth in the north, but the Midlands as well, including the constituents and businesses of Derby North?
Indeed, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for her support. And if you could just go to the Midlands, and you can see the investment already flooding in as a result of HS2. Let's turbocharge that now.
Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's kind of funny in a way to see the Prime Minister come here to gleefully re-announce a project that he himself and his office tried to put a stop to. But whilst he's in train set building mode, can I draw his attention to the Wrexham to Bidston line that would connect North Wales and Liverpool? And will he put some extra investment in there so that we can speed up improvements?
We will certainly examine very carefully the proposal that the honourable lady makes and whether it qualifies under our 1.5 billion beaching plan.
Craig Whittaker.
Friend knows the Calder Valley has been hit again with the third most devastating flood in 7.5 years. Getting across the Pennines at the best of times is a struggle, let alone when you've been flooded. So the news about Northern Powerhouse Rail is fabulous news for us in the Calder Valley. But can my honourable friend assure the House and members that we won't wait for HS2B to be determined before we start Northern Powerhouse Rail? No, my honourable friend is, well, first of all, I extend my commiserations to all the people of Calder Valley who've experienced flooding. We all know how traumatic a flood can be. But I can assure him that we will certainly allow no delay in pushing ahead with all the branches of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The HS2 project, albeit somewhat shambolically handled, is great news for England. But it shows once again the contempt with which this government holds the people of Wales. The entire budget for electrifying the main line to Swansea would be less than 1% of the vast sums that are being talked about today. So will the Prime Minister today commit to electrifying the main line to Swansea, or will he continue to hold the people of Wales in contempt?
Mr. Speaker, as he knows, as I've just said to another honourable gentleman, the North Wales will benefit from the line to Crewe, and as for the line, we already have electrified the line to Cardiff. We already have electrified the line to Cardiff, and I urge him to get on to his friends in the Welsh Labour government and tell them to stop. They squandered £144 million on a study for the bypass of the M4, which they then decided not to do.
Stephen Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I warmly welcome what my right honourable friend has said today, particularly the announcement of HS2 and the review of the governance arrangements. But can he confirm that he'll also use this as an opportunity to embed the skills we need to deliver that infrastructure and open academies such as the Tunnelling Academy he opened during the Crossrail construction period?
Yes, indeed, Mr. Speaker, and I remember well working with my right honourable friend on that project and many others. This will drive jobs and apprenticeships for young people for a generation to come.
Andrew Wilson.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome, to use the Prime Minister's own words, his investment in the skeleton of the UK economy, the thigh bone, the knee bone, the ankle bone, but he has forgotten about the red hand of Ulster, which appears to be detached from his plan. Could he outline for us what procurement opportunities and what project opportunities there will be for Northern Ireland, including a commitment to a bridge between Northern Ireland and the UK, which would improve the sinews of the arm and the attachment of the hand to the rest of the body?
And I want to say that the honourable gentleman's characteristic optimism is in marked contrast to the negativity that we heard from the leader of the opposition. Of course, there will be opportunities for procurement in Northern Ireland and indeed elsewhere, and buses spring to mind.
Rachel McLean.
Mr. Speaker, Redditch is only a short hop away from HS2 terminus in Birmingham, so we welcome today's announcement. But does the Prime Minister agree with me that because my constituents have the highest rate of going to work by bus, Redditch is the perfect candidate for Britain's first all-electric bus town?
What a brilliant idea, Mr. Speaker.
Mike Malm.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is welcomed, if not delayed, news, in particular for Manchester and Greater Manchester more widely. Can we ensure, though, that the Metro mayors and the council leaders are hardwired into the review, but also, in the way that's already been suggested, we do consider also starting at Manchester and meeting in the middle to make sure that we get the benefits early on, particularly for education, schools and jobs in my town?
Prime Minister. I thank the honourable gentleman. I can say that we will indeed be working with the Metro mayors and already are consulting them on exactly that.
Andrew Percy.
We've had the fluffy end of the lollipop for too long in the North on transport funding, so I absolutely am made up by this decision on HS2 and HS3, and I support my honourable friend in Doncaster North's comments too. Can I ask him also, though, to look at the Operator Service Option Fund for underutilised line? There are just 2 services on the Goole-Sneath-Leeds line every day. That's not enough to allow the people of Leeds to come and enjoy Goole. So can he please look at that and ensure that we make these underutilised lines better used?
Yes. Mr. Speaker, I'd be only too happy to look in detail at the Goole-Leeds line to see what we can do to assist. We'll suck it and see, as they say.
Mr. Speaker, Newcastle and the North East need this infrastructure investment in both HS2 and Northern Powerhouse Rail without any further delay. So can I make a very immediately deliverable improvement to our national infrastructure that will ensure the North East and Newcastle are NPR and HS2 ready by investing in our East Coast main line, which needs urgent infrastructure investment between York and Newcastle.
She makes an excellent point, and we are indeed upgrading the digital signalling on the East Coast main line.
Mark Palsy.
The Prime Minister spoke about the spine of our rail network, and that's currently provided by the West Coast Main Line, and the upgrade that received a few years ago led to many businesses being attracted to Rugby. What reassurance can he provide to them that with HS2 bypassing Rugby, we will continue to retain fast services on a well-maintained railway?
I've looked at this very issue. I thank my honourable friend. I've looked at this very issue, and I'm convinced that it will continue. The existing capacity will continue to be extremely important, and will continue to drive jobs and investment in Rugby, where he and I think, opened a fantastic new electric taxi factory.
Matt Kane.
Speaker, despite going under my house, HS2 will reduce journey times from Manchester Airport in my constituency to London from 2 hours 24 minutes to 59 minutes, opening up a plethora of opportunities for the poor people of the South East, for the great city of Manchester. The Prime Minister's dodged the question, Mr. Speaker, from my friend from Oldham and from Blakely and Broughton. If he wants to level up and have a northern powerhouse, why doesn't he start building the line from Manchester down?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we're building Northern Powerhouse Rail as fast as we possibly can, but he will appreciate that that project is not in a state of the readiness of the Birmingham to London route.
But do we realise more benefits for towns like Winsford in my constituency by integrating Northern Powerhouse Rail, the conventional rail network and HS2? And can my right honourable friend confirm that the Cheshire salt mines and the threat of sinkholes will be considered as part of the next review?
Mr. Speaker, I can certainly confirm that the threat of sinkholes from the Cheshire salt mines will be considered as part of the review.
Ruth Cummins.
I
welcome the announcement that the northern section of HS2 will go ahead because, crucially, it will be integrated with NPR. As the Prime Minister said, this country has been held back by inadequate infrastructure. So does the Prime Minister agree with me that Northern Powerhouse Rail must include a city centre stop in Bradford?
I thank her for the representation she makes on behalf of Bradford. I see exactly the point that she makes. We'll be consulting on that issue very shortly.
To Kieran Mullen.
I welcome the announcement today. The Prime Minister has well and truly swept the leaves off the line of transport infrastructure investment in this country. I know businesses in Crewe and Nantwich will benefit locally, not jobs and businesses in London, but locally in Crewe and Nantwich. When it comes to bus investment, can we ensure that local residents get a really strong voice in deciding where these new buses go and how often they go there?
Of course, Mr. Speaker, it's vital that the expansion of local bus services should meet local demand. In my experience, there's no shortage of local demand in most parts of the country.
And Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. HS2 is a dire reflection on this government's environmental credentials, with the destruction of 100 ancient woodlands and a miserably small modal shift of just 5% of passengers who would otherwise fly or drive. Indeed, the government's own figures show that HS2 does not cut carbon emissions. So if it is to go ahead, then surely it should be required to meet, at the very least, the European average for high-speed rail modal shift, which is 15% for cars and 30% for planes. Why doesn't it?
Mr. Speaker, we've just announced the biggest ever package in history for electric, for zero-carbon buses and possibly hydrogen buses as well. And HS2 is the most low-carbon, most efficient way of getting around this country. I think that will nothing please them.
My right honourable friend, can I congratulate him on actually grasping the nettle and building the infrastructure in the north. It's really welcome. It delivers on the manifesto promises. Part of the problem with the rising costs in Leeds is because of the incompetence of Leeds City Council and a Labour leader who, quite frankly, couldn't organise an event at one of the local breweries, putting this station in a totally inappropriate place. Could I ask my right honourable friend, as part of the review, to look properly at where the station is located and make sure that, as part of the review, he takes account of being able to use existing rail routes and infrastructure?
Mr. Speaker, we will be making sure as we go forward, and there's going to be a review, I must be clear with the House, we will be going forward with the whole programme, but we will be ensuring that we get proper value and proper political leadership and grip of the whole programme.
Boris.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. For 4 decades, the East Midlands economy has been losing skilled work, and it's caused extraordinary damage to our communities. HS2 is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reverse this decline and to add tens and tens of thousands of skilled jobs to our community. The Prime Minister has taken a difficult but very welcome decision. Can he reassure East Midlands people that there won't be any unnecessary delay to HS2B and that Midlands Engine Rail will be woven into the scheme as well?
Yes, I can, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Particularly welcome the Northern Powerhouse Rail connection with HS2, but could I also ask him to look at the procurement process and make sure that it's our UK-based companies like Hitachi Rail in my Sedgefield constituency that get a real chance at getting the business out of this, and can it be done as quickly as possible so that they have an opportunity to plan the procurement?
I want to thank my honourable friend. He has lobbied me personally several times on this very issue, and I can assure him that the plant in question and the jobs in question will be uppermost in our minds.
Stephen Flynn.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. At the last count, HS2 was projected to cost the City of Aberdeen £220 million. Based upon that figure, would the Prime Minister agree that HS2 will be an economic disaster for my city?
On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, HS2 will shorten journey times across the whole of the United Kingdom, including and particularly Scotland, and indeed, as I said earlier on, there will be Barnet consequentials following from the fantastic announcements we've made today about buses and other modes of transport.
Croft.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your statement and your vision to power up the North through transport. Historically, Scunthorpe steel has been used for many national infrastructure projects, such as HMS2 Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier. Does he agree with me that we should be using our world-class steel, such as the steel we produce in Scunthorpe, for projects such as this?
Mr. Speaker, I pay tribute to the workers of British Steel and what they do. Most of our train tracks come from British Steel, whether in Scunthorpe or elsewhere, and we will do our utmost, notwithstanding the difficulties that plant currently faces, we will do our utmost to ensure that remains the case in the future.
Mr. Speaker, when we were first talking about HS2 10 years ago, we were not talking about a climate emergency. Given the landscape has changed in that respect, surely the government should be significantly investing much more than being proposed today behind regional, sub-regional transport systems, buses and cycle routes on the level that the French and Continentals are doing.
Mr. Speaker, I think I can say without fear of contradiction, I've built more cycle lanes than anybody else in this House. But you know, even what I did, not always popular, but what I did is nothing compared to what we are about to do. The investment we are about to make in buses is absolutely colossal, and I'm surprised that he finds grounds for criticism.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I warmly welcome my honourable friend's attention to the spine of the country, but will he apply his orthopaedic talents to what should be the muscular limb that connects London to Hastings, which it will take longer to get to than the hour it will take to get to Manchester in future?
My right honourable friend makes an extremely good point, and I will certainly examine the London to Hastings route. I don't know which part of the anatomy it should be, but it is vital to our nation's prosperity, whatever it is.
Chris Brown.
Is the Prime Minister seriously suggesting that there will not be a single extra penny as a result of today's announcements for Wales? Before he gives me any bluster about anything else, the truth of the matter is they promised that they were going to electrify the line all the way to Swansea. They said that by 2017 the Valley's lines to my constituency would be electrified. None of that came to pass. All we want is a new railway line in the Rhondda Vach and to open the tunnel from Blaincombe